Past. Okay, so you want to own a towing company. Tow trucks on call 24/7, accident scenes, breakdowns on the highway, police contracts, insurance company referrals, cash payments from stranded motorists. You dispatch the trucks, the drivers do the work, the revenue keeps coming because cars keep breaking down. Sounds like the perfect business. And honestly, from the outside, it really does look that way. But here is what people who actually invest in this business know, and what most people watching reality TV shows about tow truck drivers never tell you. A towing company is not a fleet of trucks that print money on emergency calls. It is a capital-intensive, highly regulated, insurance-dependent service business with brutal competition, razor-thin margins on half your calls, and operational complexity that runs 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The revenue per tow is real. The insurance costs are real, in ways that most people never see coming. Let's start at the beginning. When people say they want to own a towing company, they are usually picturing one thing: emergency roadside service. A car breaks down on the side of the highway. The driver calls AAA or their insurance company. You get dispatched. You show up, hook up the vehicle, tow it to a repair shop or the customer's home, collect $85 to $150 for the service, and move on to the next call. Do that 15 times a day across a small fleet, and you are generating serious revenue. That is one piece of the business. But the towing industry is far more diverse and far more segmented than most people realize. Emergency light-duty towing, the standard passenger vehicle breakdowns and accidents, roadside assistance, jump starts, tire changes, lockouts, fuel delivery, services that do not require towing but generate billable calls. Heavy-duty towing and recovery, semi-trucks, buses, RVs, construction equipment, a completely different business requiring specialized equipment costing $250,000 to $500,000 per truck. Impound and repossession towing, contracted work with municipalities, police departments, and banks to remove illegally parked vehicles or repossess cars from delinquent borrowers. Private property towing, apartment complexes, shopping centers, office parks that contract with tow companies to enforce parking rules. And finally, long-distance transport and specialty towing, exotic cars, vintage vehicles, motorcycles, and equipment hauling. Each category has completely different economics, different equipment requirements, different margin structures, and different competitive dynamics. A light-duty emergency towing company and a heavy-duty recovery operation are as different as a barbershop and a manufacturing plant, even though both involve moving vehicles. Here is the part that surprises people when they first look at this industry. Towing is not a growth business. The total number of tows performed annually in the United States has been essentially flat or declining slightly over the past decade. Why? Cars are more reliable. The average vehicle age is now 12.8 years, but modern cars can easily run 150,000 to 200,000 miles with minimal breakdowns. Roadside assistance programs are more widespread. AAA alone has over 64 million members. Every major auto insurance company offers roadside coverage. That means customers are not calling you directly. They are calling a dispatcher who contracts with you at negotiated rates, not retail prices. And competition is intense. The towing industry in the United States includes approximately 35,000 to 40,000 individual towing companies operating roughly 65,000 to 70,000 tow trucks. In most metropolitan areas, there are dozens of towing companies competing for the same calls, the same contracts, and the same accident scenes. The barriers to entry are relatively low. Anyone with $50,000 to $80,000 can buy a used tow truck, get licensed, get insured, and start taking calls. That creates constant downward pressure on pricing and constant competition for volume. Now let's talk about what it actually costs to start a towing company from scratch. The single largest expense is equipment. A new light-duty flatbed tow truck, the industry standard for safely transporting passenger vehicles, costs between $75,000 and $120,000 depending on the chassis, the bed length, and the equipment package. A new wheel-lift tow truck, the traditional hook and chain successor that lifts vehicles by the wheels, costs $60,000 to $95,000. A quality used flatbed with 60,000 to 100,000 miles runs $35,000 to $65,000. A used wheel lift with similar mileage runs $25,000 to $50,000. Most new operators start with one or two used trucks to minimize initial capital outlay. Let's assume you buy two used flatbed trucks at $45,000 each. That is $90,000 in equipment before you have made a single dollar. But you are not done. Each truck needs to be outfitted with additional equipment. Amber warning lights and strobes to meet DOT visibility requirements, $800 to $1,500 per truck. Wireless winch remote controls, $400 to $800. Wheel dollies for front-wheel drive vehicles, $600 to $1,200 per truck. Tire skates, straps, chains, and rigging equipment, $500 to $1,000 per truck. GPS tracking and dispatch integration systems, $300 to $600 per truck initially, plus $25 to $50 per month per truck in subscription fees. Add it all up, and outfitting 2 used tow trucks with proper equipment costs approximately $5,000 to $9,000 on top of the purchase price. Now you need insurance, and this is where most prospective towing company owners get their first shock. Commercial auto insurance for tow trucks is extraordinarily expensive because the risk profile is high. Tow truck drivers operate in traffic, often at accident scenes, frequently in bad weather, and they are hauling other people's vehicles worth $15,000 to $80,000. A comprehensive commercial insurance policy for 2 tow trucks, including liability, physical damage, on-hook coverage which ensures the vehicle being towed, and garage keeper's liability, typically costs $18,000 to $35,000 per year. In high-risk markets or for new operators with no operating history, that can jump to $40,000 to $55,000 annually. That is $1,500 to $4,500 per month in insurance costs before you generate a single dollar of revenue. And you cannot operate legally without it. No insurance, no business. Next, you need licensing and permits. Every state requires commercial motor vehicle registration and DOT numbers for tow trucks. In most states, tow truck operators also need a specific tow truck operator license or motor carrier permit. Many municipalities require a local business license, and some require a towing company permit with background checks and proof of insurance. Total licensing and permitting costs typically run $1,200 to $3,500 initially, with annual renewals of $600 to $1,800. You need a physical location. This is not a business you can run entirely from home. You need space to park the truck securely when not in use, space to store impounded vehicles if you do impound work, and ideally a small office for dispatch and administrative work. In many jurisdictions, zoning laws prohibit parking commercial tow trucks in residential areas. A small secure yard with a fence, lighting, and a basic office structure typically costs $1,200 to $3,000 per month to lease depending on location. Some operators start by renting parking spaces at a commercial truck yard for $300 to $800 per month per truck, minimizing overhead while building revenue. You need dispatch and communication systems. Most towing companies use dedicated dispatch software that integrates with GPS tracking, handles billing, tracks jobs, and manages driver assignments. Quality systems like Towbook, Tracker, or Dispatch Anywhere cost $100 to $250 per month plus setup fees of $500 to $1,500. You need commercial-grade two-way radios or a reliable cellular dispatch system, $200 to $500 per truck in equipment plus $40 to $80 per month in service fees per driver. Add business formation costs, LLC or corporation setup, business bank accounts, accounting software, initial marketing, vehicle wraps and branding, business cards, and a basic website, and you are adding another $4,000 to $8,000. Finally, you need working capital to cover operating expenses for the first 3 to 6 months while you build call volume and wait for payment from insurance companies and fleet accounts, who often pay on 30 to 60-day terms. That is another $15,000 to $30,000 in reserve capital. Total startup costs to launch a 2-truck light-duty towing company, approximately $135,000 to $225,000 depending on whether you buy used or new equipment and how much you can minimize overhead initially. That is a substantial capital requirement for a service business, and it is before you have hired a single driver or answered a single call. Now let's talk about revenue. The towing industry has 2 fundamentally different revenue models, and understanding the difference is critical. Direct consumer calls, where the customer calls you directly, you quote a price, you perform the service, and you collect payment immediately, usually $85 to $175 per tow depending on distance and circumstances. And contracted dispatch calls, where you are dispatched by AAA, motor clubs, insurance companies like Geico or State Farm, or fleet management companies, and you are paid a pre-negotiated rate, typically $50 to $85 per tow, significantly less than retail. Here is the problem. The majority of calls, 60% to 75% of total volume for most operators come through contracted dispatch networks, not direct consumer calls. You join the AAA contractor network or the agro dispatch network because that is where the volume is, but you are getting paid wholesale rates, not retail rates. A tow that you would charge a direct customer $125 for, you are getting paid $65 to $75 by the motor club. And you do not get paid immediately. You submit invoices and wait 30 to 60 days for payment. Direct calls pay better, but they are harder to generate. You need strong local brand recognition, excellent Google and Yelp reviews, top search engine rankings, and often paid advertising to capture direct calls. And even then, you are competing with every other towing company in the market doing the same thing. Let's talk about the revenue per truck in detail. A tow truck operating efficiently in a moderately busy market can complete 4 to 8 tows per 12-hour shift depending on distance, traffic, and call density. Let's assume an average of 5 tows per shift. If the truck operates 5 days per week, that is 25 tows per week, or roughly 1,250 tows per year per truck. At an average revenue of $75 per tow, blending direct consumer calls at $120 and contracted calls at $65, that truck generates approximately $93,750 in annual revenue. A two-truck operation running both trucks actively generates $187,500 in annual gross revenue. That sounds substantial until you start subtracting the costs. Let's break down the expense structure in painful detail. Driver labor is the largest single operating expense. Most tow truck drivers are paid hourly, typically $15 to $22 per hour depending on experience and market, or they are paid a combination of hourly base plus commission, usually $3 to $8 per tow. A full-time driver working 50 hours per week at $18 per hour costs approximately $46,800 per year in gross wages. Add payroll taxes at 7.65%, workers' compensation insurance at 8% to 15% of payroll depending on the state and the company's safety record, and any benefits, and the total loaded labor cost is roughly $54,000 to $58,000 per driver per year. If you operate 2 trucks and drive one yourself while employing 1 driver, your labor cost for the employee is $54,000 to $58,000 annually. If you employ 2 drivers and manage the business full-time, your total driver labor cost is $108,000 to $116,000 per year, or roughly 58% to 62% of gross revenue. Most owner-operators start by driving 1 truck themselves to minimize labor costs while building revenue. Fuel costs are substantial and highly variable. A tow truck getting 8 to 12 miles per gallon and driving 25,000 to 35,000 miles per year consumes roughly 2,100 to 4,400 gallons of diesel or gasoline annually. At an average fuel price of $3.50 per gallon, that is $7,350 to $15,400 per truck per year, or $14,700 to $30,800 for 2 trucks. That is another 8% to 16% of gross revenue depending on fuel prices and route efficiency. Insurance, as already mentioned, runs $18,000 to $35,000 or more annually for 2 trucks. That is 10% to 19% of revenue. Maintenance and repairs on tow trucks are constant and expensive. Tow trucks operate in harsh conditions, heavy loads, frequent stops and starts, extended idling, off-road recovery situations. Transmissions, brakes, hydraulic systems, and suspensions all take a beating. Industry data suggests budgeting 10% to 15% of truck value annually for maintenance and repairs. On 2 trucks worth a combined $90,000, that is $9,000 to $13,500 per year, or roughly 5% to 7% of revenue. Tires are a separate line item. Heavy-duty tires for tow trucks cost $300 to $500 each. A truck needs 6 tires. Full replacement runs $1,800 to $3,000 per truck every 35,000 to 50,000 miles. Averaged annually, that is another $1,200 to $2,500 per truck, or $2,400 to $5,000 for 2 trucks. Yard or storage lot rent, $1,200 to $3,000 per month, or $14,400 to $36,000 per year. Dispatch software and technology, $1,800 to $3,600 per year. Licensing, permits, and association fees, $1,200 to $2,500 annually. Marketing and advertising, Google Ads, vehicle wraps, local sponsorships, directory listings, $3,000 to $8,000 per year. Administrative costs, accounting, legal, office supplies, phones, $2,500 to $5,000 per year. Now add loan payments if you finance the trucks. If you borrowed $80,000 at 8% interest over 5 years, your annual debt service is roughly $19,400. Let's total the annual expenses for a 2-truck operation where the owner drives 1 truck. Employee driver labor, $56,000. Fuel, $22,000. Insurance, $26,000. Maintenance and repairs, $11,000. Tires, $3,500. Yard rent, $24,000. Technology and dispatch, $2,500. Licensing and fees, $1,800. Marketing, $5,000. Administrative, $3,500. Loan payments, $19,400. Total annual operating expenses, $174,700. On gross revenue of $187,500, that leaves $12,800 in operating profit before the owner pays themselves. But the owner worked full-time, 50 to 60 hours per week, driving the truck, managing dispatch, handling customer service, doing the bookkeeping. If you value the owner's labor at $50,000 per year, the business is operating at a $37,200 annual loss. This is the financial reality that the start a towing company and make 6 figures YouTube videos never show. The gross revenue looks attractive. The expenses consume almost everything. The margin exists only if the owner is willing to work for significantly below market wages or if the operation scales to 4, 6, or 10 plus trucks where fixed costs like insurance, dispatch systems, and yard rent are spread across more revenue-generating units. Here is the part of the business that most people do not understand until they are inside it. Towing is incredibly call-dependent and time-sensitive. A customer's car breaks down at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. They call their insurance roadside assistance. The call gets dispatched to you and 3 other towing companies simultaneously. Whoever accepts first and can arrive fastest gets the job. You are 12 minutes away. Another operator is 8 minutes away. They get the call. You get nothing. Or you get dispatched to a call 18 miles away. You drive there, 25 minutes in traffic. You arrive and discover the customer already got towed by another company or decided to call a friend instead. You just burned an hour and $8 in fuel and generated 0 revenue. Or you get dispatched to a simple breakdown that should pay $65. You arrive and discover the vehicle is stuck in a muddy ditch and requires a winch recovery. That is 90 minutes of work instead of 30 minutes. You still only get paid $65 because that is what the contract says. The contracted call economics are brutally tight. You are paid a flat rate regardless of how long the job takes or how complicated it becomes. You have no negotiating power because if you refuse calls or are slow to respond, the dispatch network drops you from their rotation and sends calls to competitors instead. Now let's talk about the revenue model that many towing companies depend on to survive: impound and rotation towing. Rotation towing is when police departments maintain a list of approved towing companies and rotate calls among them for accident scenes, abandoned vehicles, DUI tows, and illegal parking enforcement. Getting on the police rotation is extremely valuable because it guarantees call volume, and police-initiated tows typically pay better than motor club calls. $95 to $150 per tow plus storage fees if the vehicle goes to your impound lot. But getting on the rotation is incredibly difficult. Most police departments have a formal application process with strict requirements. Minimum fleet size, often 3 to 5 trucks, proof of commercial insurance with high liability limits, often $1 million to $2 million, a secure impound lot meeting specific security and fencing requirements, 24/7 availability and response time guarantees, usually 20 to 30 minutes maximum anywhere in the jurisdiction, clean driving records for all drivers, and often multiple years of operating history. New towing companies almost never get approved. The rotations are locked up by established operators who have been on the list for 10, 15, or 20 years. When a spot opens up, there are 15 companies applying for it. Without rotation access, you are competing entirely in the lower margin contracted call market. Impound storage fees are where many rotation operators make their real money. When a vehicle is towed by police order and the owner does not immediately claim it, the car sits in your impound lot accruing daily storage fees. typically $25 to $50 per day. A vehicle that sits for 10 days before the owner retrieves it generates $250 to $500 in storage fees on top of the tow fee. Vehicles that are abandoned or never claimed can eventually be sold at auction, generating additional revenue. But operating an impound lot adds substantial costs. Higher property costs for a larger fenced and secured lot, often $3,000 to $6,000 per month, security cameras, lighting, and fencing to meet regulatory requirements, administrative burden of managing impound paperwork, lien processing and owner notifications, and liability risk if vehicles are damaged or vandalized while in your custody. Let's talk about what actually happens day to day when you own and operate a towing company. You start early because breakdowns happen around the clock, but morning rush hour, 6:30 to 9 a.m., is one of the busiest times. You are monitoring the dispatch system, waiting for calls. A call comes in, a vehicle breakdown on the interstate 9 miles away. You accept, update your status to en route, and drive to the scene. You arrive, assess the situation, communicate with the customer about where they want the vehicle towed. You position your truck, deploy the flatbed, secure the vehicle with straps and chocks, and load it. You transport the vehicle to the requested destination, a repair shop 14 miles away. You unload, complete the paperwork, collect payment if it is a direct call, or log the service for invoicing if it is a contracted call. Total time, 68 minutes. Revenue, $72. You return to service and wait for the next call. Between calls, you are maintaining the truck, checking fluid levels, inspecting the hydraulic system, cleaning up old straps and debris. You are calling customers who owe balances, following up on unpaid invoices from 45 days ago. You are dealing with an angry customer who claims you scratched their vehicle during transport and wants you to pay for repairs. Your insurance company needs photos and documentation. You are scheduling maintenance. The truck needs an oil change and the brakes are starting to squeal. You are prospecting for new business, calling auto repair shops to ask if they need a preferred towing provider, stopping by apartment complexes to pitch private property towing contracts. You are getting rejected 90% of the time. You are managing a driver who showed up late, again, and you are debating whether to fire them and deal with being short-staffed or tolerate the unreliability. At midnight, you get a call, an accident on the highway. You have been up since 6 a.m., but you are the only driver available. You respond. This is not a passive business. This is a 24/7, on-demand service operation that requires you to be available, responsive, and operationally ready around the clock. Here is the competitive dynamic that has reshaped parts of this industry over the past decade. Consolidation. Private equity firms and regional operators have been acquiring small independent towing companies and rolling them into larger regional networks. These consolidators achieve economies of scale in insurance. They negotiate fleet-wide policies at 20% to 30% lower premiums than independents pay, volume purchasing of fuel, tires, and parts, centralized dispatch reducing administrative cost per truck, and contracts with insurance companies and fleet management companies that require multi-market coverage that small operators cannot provide. If you are operating 2 to 5 trucks independently, you are competing against regional operators with 50, 100, or 200 trucks who can undercut your pricing, respond faster because they have more trucks in more locations, and win the large contracts you cannot even bid on. Let's talk about repossession towing, a niche that many towing companies enter to diversify revenue. Banks and auto lenders contract with repo companies to recover vehicles from borrowers who have defaulted on loans. Repo work pays $250 to $400 per vehicle recovered, significantly higher than a standard tow. But repo work is high risk, confrontational, often performed at night or in hostile situations, and requires specialized skills and temperament. Repo agents face verbal abuse, physical threats, and occasional violence. The liability and safety risks are real. Many states require separate licensing for repossession agents, and insurance costs are even higher than standard towing. Repo work can be lucrative for operators who specialize in it, but it is not a casual add-on service. It is a different business with different risks. Now let's run the numbers 2 ways: best case and realistic case. Best case. You start with $160,000 in capital. You purchase 2 quality used flatbed trucks at $48,000 each, invest in proper equipment, secure a modest but functional yard, and get excellent insurance rates because you have a clean driving record and prior industry experience. You work 1 truck full-time yourself and hire 1 experienced, reliable driver for the second truck. You hustle aggressively and secure a mix of contracted motor club calls and direct consumer business. Your 2 trucks average 6 tows per day each, 300 working days per year. That is 3,600 tows annually. Your blended average revenue per tow is $82 because you have built a strong direct call percentage. Total annual revenue, $295,200. Your expenses are well managed. Labor for 1 driver, $56,000. Fuel, $28,000. Insurance negotiated well, $22,000. Maintenance, $13,000. Tires, $4,000. Yard, $18,000. Technology, licensing, marketing, and administrative, $12,000. Loan payment, $20,000. Total expenses, $173,000. Operating profit, $122,200. You worked full-time driving, so your effective total compensation is $122,200 for the year. By year 3, as you pay down debt and add a 3rd truck, your annual net income grows to $160,000 to $180,000 while working 55 hours per week. You have built a real business with asset value and cash flow. Realistic case, you start with $140,000, much of it borrowed. You buy 2 used trucks at $42,000 each. You struggle to find a good yard and end up paying $2,400 per month. Your insurance as a new operator is $33,000 per year. Your hired driver is inconsistent and you go through 3 drivers in the first 18 months, dealing with constant turnover and training costs. Your trucks average 4.5 tows per day each because call volume is lower than projected and competition is intense. That is 2,700 tows annually. Your average revenue per tow is $74, heavily weighted toward contracted calls. Total revenue, $199,800. Your expenses run high. Labor, $58,000 plus turnover costs. Fuel, $26,000. Insurance, $33,000. Maintenance, higher because of rough use by inexperienced drivers, $15,000. Tires, $5,000. Yard, $28,800. Technology, licensing, marketing, admin, $13,000. Loan payment, $22,000. Total, $200,800. You are operating at an $1,000 annual loss before paying yourself. Your effective income is whatever you personally generated driving the truck, maybe $75,000 in production, minus the $1,000 loss, leaving you with $74,000 for 60 hours per week of work, high stress, and constant operational challenges. After 2 years of grinding, you sell the business at a loss and exit the industry. The difference between those outcomes is not the business model. Both operators are running light-duty towing with similar equipment. The difference is insurance costs, location quality, driver reliability, call volume, and the operator's ability to secure enough high-value direct calls to offset the low-margin contracted work. The U.S. towing industry generates approximately $8 to $10 billion in annual revenue across roughly 35,000 to 40,000 companies. The largest operators, national companies like Agero operating networks of thousands of contracted towers, control significant market share. But the majority of actual towing is still performed by independent operators and small regional companies running 3 to 20 trucks. The operators who build genuinely profitable towing companies are typically those who secure police rotation contracts that guarantee volume and allow impound revenue, operate 8 to 15 plus trucks to spread fixed costs and achieve insurance and purchasing economies of scale, specialize in a profitable niche like heavy-duty recovery where competition is lower and margins are higher, or build a strong local brand with exceptional service that generates repeat direct consumer calls at retail pricing. The operators who fail are almost always those who underestimated insurance costs, the single biggest surprise expense, could not generate sufficient call volume to keep trucks productive, got priced out by larger competitors on contracted work, or could not handle the 24/7 operational demands and burned out physically and mentally. Towing companies are real businesses. The revenue is real. But the business works only for those who have the capital to weather the first 18 to 24 months of low margins, the operational discipline to control costs relentlessly, the customer service excellence to win direct calls, and the physical and mental stamina to run a business that never sleeps. The truck tows the car. It does not answer the phone, negotiate the contracts, or manage the cash flow.